Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and today we're going to be taking a look at the ASRock B450M Steel Legend. Keep watching to find out more. Okay, so on today's video we're going to be taking a look at this. This is the ASRock B450M Steel Legend. In my opinion, possibly the best Micro ATX board for the AM4 platform that you can buy on the market today. Now, this video is recorded in October 2019, so obviously bear that in mind if you're watching this a little bit later. But let's take a look at some of the features of this board, and then we'll go through, look at the connectivity and all the options, and I'll give you some of my thoughts on why I think this is actually probably the best value board you can get. And also, this is also relevant to the B450 Steel Legend, the full-size ATX version. They do share a lot of similarities, but obviously size being one of the things that separates them. So first of all, the key thing for me is price. Now, I like to be slightly behind the bleeding edge of technology, and the reason it's called the bleeding edge is because it hurts. It hurts your wallet generally, so if you want to be at that bleeding edge of technology, now for AM4 users, that's going to be the X570 chipset, which carries a hefty price tag. It carries a lot of performance, but it is going to hurt your wallet. Whereas this, at the moment in the UK, you're looking at about £80, which for me is actually fantastic value for money, and you can still create a fantastic system even with the latest AMD CPUs on this platform. Now, like I kind of alluded to, the Micro ATX platform isn't everybody's cup of tea. So a lot of people would have seen Micro ATX in the video description and immediately dismissed it. But I don't think you should. This, for a Micro ATX board, actually is a really good option. Now, if you've got a Micro ATX case, then obviously you're going to have to go with a Micro ATX board. But even if you've got a slightly larger ATX case or a compact ATX chassis, then maybe this still might be an option for you. So let's take a quick look at the packaging and go through some of the specifications listed on the box before we take it out and go through the unboxing experience. So first of all, one of the first things I noticed about this packaging is immediately AMD Ryzen 3000 desktop ready. So these boards straight off are ready for the 3000 series processors. Obviously, as new CPUs are being released, then you will need to do a BIOS update to enable the latest features and also the support for those. But essentially, as it comes out of the box, any of the processors which are currently on the market will work with this straight away. Now, that includes the Ryzen 9 3950X, which is listed at the moment on the BIOS compatibility charts. And also, if you're looking at the other end of the market, then you've got support for the Athlon 200GE series and all those kinds of integrated APU configurations. Usual suspects at the bottom, so we've got HDMI support, polychrome sync, which is ASRock's ARGB implementation. We've also got support for obviously desktop 2000 series processors, AMD Athlon and Ryzen CPUs, and as it says, we're based on the B450 chipset, which in itself has proved to be a pretty reliable and powerful chipset. So nothing much on the sides. On the back, pretty much the same deal. On the back of the box, so we've got some information here. So, rule your own lighting, polychrome sync. This is one of the key features of this board. Let's not skirt around the issue. If you're into your RGB and your addressable RGB, then this has definitely got to be towards the top of your shopping list. ASRock boards, generally, the Pro 4 board and this one alike, they both have loads of configuration options for both RGB and addressable RGB. And this particular board has got a load of RGB, or addressable RGB, built onto the motherboard itself, both in the kind of I/O bridge area at the bottom and also the rear I/O panel. There's also illumination in there, which you'll probably be seeing in some of the B-roll. Some of the other great features of this, now we've got dual M.2 support for SSDs, so if it's NVMe, you've got an option for one of those, plus a SSD in the M.2 slots on the board. There's two of these, which actually is quite a rare thing for a Micro ATX board. Generally, we see this more commonly on ATX boards, but on a Micro ATX board, you're lucky if you get one M.2, let alone a pair of them. So coming down to what may be a kind of like a stopping point for some of you, this is the power chokes or your FETs. Now, this has got premium 60 amp power chokes, as it says on the box, and this is a 4-phase design. Now, this is very similar for a lot of the Micro ATX boards and actually some of the full-size ATX boards based on both the X370, B450 and other chipsets. Now, going back to a previous video I did, which you can check out up here, we did a look at some of the compatibility issues and also overclocking possibilities on a lot of these AMD boards. And actually, this particular board is rated relatively well. As far as Micro ATX goes on the B450 platform, this actually does really well. There is advisories against overclocking some of the Ryzen 9 chips because of the limitations of the chokes, but for pretty much most other builds, Ryzen 7, Ryzen 5, obviously Ryzen 3, then usage and overclocking isn't going to be a problem with this, although you may decide that additional cooling around those areas may be needed. But in most modern chassis these days, we have a ton of fans, so keeping this thing cool and keeping it reliable shouldn't be a problem. Another great selling point of this board is the Nichicon caps. So we've got Nichicon caps around the board, and also specifically for the audio, we've got gold caps for there. So audio, as was mentioned in a video by Tech Yes City, the audio implementation on this board is actually fantastic. And again, I'll put a link to that up here or down in the video description so you can check it for yourself. So if audio is your thing, then this board is going to be great for you. We've also got usual features, which is becoming more and more mainstream, and that is the supported slot for the PCI Express. So we've got stainless steel protection and support. So if you're using bigger graphics cards which have a tendency to sag, then this is going to strengthen that slot to give you that little bit of added protection. So let's get the boring bit out of the way and we'll go through some of the specs listed on the board itself. So we've got support for AMD AM4 socket, it's the AMD B450 chipset. Memory support, we've got 4 DIMM support, which again is nice to see. Some of these Micro ATX boards only support 2 DIMMs, so 4 DIMMs supported here with DDR4 supported up to 3533 overclocked. We've got 1 PCI Express 3x16 slot, we've got 1 PCI Express 2.0 16 times slot, and 1 PCI Express 2.0 times 1 slot. Also we've got support for AMD Crossfire X, although realistically I think most people buying this board are going to be single GPU users, if not just using an APU, so the Crossfire support is probably not really a selling point at this point in time. We've got support for the obviously AMD Radeon Vega graphics, so if you're using the 200GE or 3200G, that kind of thing, then you've got built-in support for that. So you've got HDMI and you've also got DisplayPort outputs. Storage wise, you've got 4 SATA 3s, you've got 1 Ultra M.2, which is PCI Express Gen 3x4, and also 1 M.2 for SATA 3 devices. RAID supported, RAID 0, 1 and 10, although I don't think many people are going to be using RAID these days. USB wise, we've got actually really good USB support on this, so you've got USB 3.0 Gen 2 on the rear, type A and C, you've got 6 USB 3.0 Gen 1, 2 on the front and 4 on the rear. And then you've got 6 USB 2.0, 4 on the front and 2 on the rear. So there's a lot of options right there. Audio is 7.1 channel HD audio, that's the Realtek AC892 chipset, and featuring Nichicon Fine Gold Series audio caps. So again, like I said, audio is going to be fantastic on this. It's a slightly lower number of the chipset revision for the ALC, but actually is a really, really good implementation, and the sound quality is fantastic on these boards. LAN support, we've got Realtek Gigabit LAN, and form factor is Micro ATX. So that's enough of that out of the way. Let's have a look at the board itself and see what we actually get in the box. So let's go through the bits piece by piece. So we got the rear I/O shield, which is done in this nice digital camo print, which is nice to see rather than being just a standard silver backplate. And it's also got the sort of cushioning on the back as well to stop any rattles, all that kind of stuff. We've got installing RAM modules on our AM4 motherboards. So with these boards, generally you have to be a little bit considerate of where you actually place the RAM on your board. So if this is a first time build, then this should help you immensely getting dual channel support and all those kinds of things, and just making sure that you've got your RAM in the correct slots. We've got 2 M.2 or NVMe style drive screws, which are really easy to lose, so keep hold of those. We get a ton of information actually. We get a really good quick installation guide, which looks anything from quick. We've also got a separate guide for setting up the software, so that's the ASRock apps and all those kinds of things. Get a couple of SATA cables. Now one of them is right angled and one of them is straight, so if you've got a drive which is going on an angle, or in a case where you've got limited access, then the right angle connectors are actually really useful, especially for those older 3.5 inch drives. You get a ASRock postcard. You get a round thing, which apparently is a old storage medium, which is called a DVD. And on there are drivers and all kinds of applications and other useful information, and also a Adobe Acrobat version of the manual. So if you don't want to use the manual, then you can read it off of the disc. Okay, so here is the board itself, and I personally think it looks fantastic. Again, let me know in the comments what you think of this. Visually, this board is stunning in my opinion, and is hands down probably the easiest board to implement in any kind of show build you're going to be doing, purely because the color palette on here is really good. You've got silvers, you've got greys, you've got whites, and you've got greys, blacks, all that kind of stuff. So it's a limited palette. You've got no real kind of accent colors as such, like blues or reds or anything, which may conflict with your build setup. One of the primary contenders against this board is actually the Asus Tough range, which have obviously their own Tough branding, which has got the yellow splashes on, which actually in some builds, unless you're going down that route, may actually compromise your color scheme. So for me personally, this actually looks great. The Steel Legend logos, and we've got all this kind of metal and aluminium looking. It looks pretty industrial, which I personally like. So let's go around the connectivity of this board. So let's start with the I/O on the back. So as we said before, we've got two USB 2.0, you've got a combo keyboard mouse port, display port, HDMI, two USB 3.0. Alongside that, another two USB 3.0. Next to that, we've got our USB Type-C and USB 3.1 Type-A. You've also got the gigabit LAN, and next to that, you've got your audio connections. So for most people, probably you're just going to be using the headphone port or whatever, maybe the microphone port. But if you want to go for a 7.1 sound setup, you don't have to worry about configuring your front panel headers and all that kind of stuff. You can plug all of your surround sound kit straight into the back here. Also, you can use the digital I/O if you want to, the SPDIF port, which if you're using this as a media center, which is possible, being that this is a Micro ATX, so a smaller form factor build next to a TV for a media center with the SPDIF straight into a surround sound receiver, that kind of thing. No problems at all. So moving further down, we've got our gold Nichicon audio connectors, capacitors, and the motherboard actually has separate PCB layers for your left and right channel to keep them separated. So crosstalk is down to a very, very minimum level on this. So for gamers, that kind of thing, crosstalk is going to be very, very low. At the very bottom here, we've got all of our I/O connectors. So we've got HD audio. Next to that, we've got our 3-pin 5V ARGB. Next to that, you've got an additional 4-pin 12V RGB. Then you've got your TPM connector, an old-fashioned COM port if you feel the need to use that. Next to that, you've got your USB 2.0 for your front panel. Another one of those next to it again. So if you've got a motherboard or you've got a card reader, digital card reader, then you've got connectivity for that. It's actually quite nice to see a couple of those on there, as well as all these other USB 3 connections, which I personally like. Next to that at the bottom, we've got a reset CMOS switch. You've also got two fan headers, which are 4-pin PWM, which can be configured in the BIOS to be used as either water pump connections or PWM fan connections, or you can set it to auto if you've got a 3-pin fan, that kind of thing. Moving on down, you've got your I/O connections and all that kind of stuff, which for me in this position is the ideal place for it to be. I know it is on most boards, but it's just nice to see all of these kind of I/O connections and the fan connections on this side of the board. So when you're maybe setting up a system with multiple fans or water pump or radiator, you've got some good connectivity down in this corner. Now moving up, we've got our first of our M.2 slots. So this is for SATA 3 or 6 gigabit per second devices, not NVMe. NVMe drives are going to be up here in our Ultra M.2 slot. Moving across, we've got obviously our PCI Express 16x2 slot, PCI Express 3x16 slot, PCI Express 2.0x1 slot. This bit here is one bit I really do like. Now this is a cooler for the I/O bridge, that kind of thing, and also around the outside edge, which you probably see in some of the B-roll, there are LEDs illuminating this, as is with the Steel Legend logo at the top here. Moving up through, so we've got our SATA connections on the side, which are right angled to come out of the side, so you want to tuck them around in your build to keep them out of the way. That's really nice, I'd like to see that. Next to that, you've got your USB 3.0 for your front panel headers, you've got 24-pin ATX connector and some other capacitors, etc. Another 12V RGB connection at the top. You've got 4 memory slots. Further at the top here, we've got our CPU fan headers, and there's actually a pair of them. So again, if you're using a dual cooler setup or an all-in-one and you want to connect up through there, you can do. Again, these can be configured to be used as water pump headers or CPU fan headers, however you choose in the BIOS. Further around, we've got another heatsink for the MOSFETs. Nice to see an additional one here. Again, some of the other B450 boards don't actually have an additional cooler up here, so that is nice to see. You've then got at the top, you've got your 8-pin ATX power for CPU supplementary power. and you've got all this nice Steel Legend area which covers up most of your I/O on the back to keep it all looking nice and slick. Again, underneath there you've got another chunk of aluminium to keep those FETs cool. So all in all, I think pretty much all the bases are covered here. I cannot think of anything else that they could have added to this board at this price point which would make it even more desirable. For me, it ticks all the boxes. Now I've got a Micro ATX case coming. I'm going to be doing a build in it. It's a black and white case. This is going to tie in absolutely perfectly with it. CPU wise, I'm going to be using a Ryzen 5 2600 on there, so we're not going to be overclocking to crazy levels, but the option is there if we want to. And again, if I want to upgrade this at a later date to one of the more modern Ryzen 3000 CPUs, then again, no problem whatsoever. Although again, like we said before, with the 9 series, you may wish to have some additional cooling around this area just to keep things nice and cool. But for Ryzen 7, Ryzen 5 builds, no problems whatsoever. Obviously, the same goes for Ryzen 3 style builds. That is going to be an absolute breeze. But for the price of this, around about £80, you get an absolute ton of features. For me personally, I think it looks great. The RGB implementation and the addressable RGB implementation is fantastic, easily controllable, and if you want to plug in extra addressable RGB fans, I actually have tried this. Again, you'll probably see this in the B-roll, but we've connected up a light strip, and you find that actually the lights, as it trials down this area, it will then go to the light strip section, follow along the light strip section, and then curl around into the I/O bridge, which for me, the synchronization in that just seals the deal for me. But then I am quite sad, and I do love my RGB. So that is pretty much it for the ASRock B450 Steel Legend board. Again, let me know in the comment section below what you think of it. I'm really stoked with this. I think it's fantastic value for money. The other options on the market weren't as compelling, such as the B450M mortar, which similar feature set, not quite so good on the chokes. So this should do really well. But again, let me know what you think of this in the comment section below. In the meantime, I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.